I came to be board chair about 2 years before we were into this transition. So I was just learning to be a board chair as this transition was taking place. And so it was quite an experience. There's naturally a lot of fear that you want to make sure everything goes well. I'm so committed to the success of this organization. It's so important to me that it was can't fail, right? So there's a lot of pressure associated with that. But I feel like there's also there were a lot of great folks there to work with. And when I say that, I mean our board and our existing board, the pros on the board, as well as Susan and Michael and Pamela. But there were a lot of nerves associated with going forward. One of the best things about being involved in the NSI cohort for me was having the opportunity to speak with other board chairs with lots more experience than I had, and to take that experience, to hear what they had to say, to hear their experiences, and incorporate that into what I expected or what the expectations were for me in terms of going forward as the chair during this transition. So one of the wonderful experiences being involved with the cohort was having the opportunity to meet the most wonderful board chair, Virgil. Virgil provided so much insight, so much information about questions that I didn't know I needed answers. One of the areas where he provided particular assistance was when we were talking about how to consider salaries for the new directors, how to consider bonuses. He talked about benchmarks in a way that was just revolutionary for me. I never considered it, and he allowed us to, for me, to take those ideas back and work with our board on those ideas, and then come up with our own idea or take from where and these are ideas that I would never have occurred to me. But having those experiences and being able to be around folks who'd been down this road before, who had been through transitions before, really, really provided me with just a lot, just bolstered me as I was going through this path. The transition of new directors, but particularly from a founding director, is incredibly challenging. I found it to be incredibly challenging. Rewarding in the end, but really challenging. One of the things that I realized is that you have to be very intentional about your decisions going forward, because there's so many considerations. You have to consider the founding director and their comfort with leaving. You have to consider that the incoming director has the support that it needs, that it has support from the board, that funders are comfortable with this transition. You have to consider how the board is going to operate in this new space, and it's always going to be a new space under those circumstances. And you really do have to be intentional about how you make those choices. And I'd say that being intentional means really considering how all these moving parts are going to work together, thinking sort of forward into, okay, well, what is this going to mean in terms of how this whole thing is going to be put together, and figuring out the ways that what things you can do as a board chair, to ensure that you can have as much success as possible. I would say this program made it really a lot easier for me. I wouldn't have known where to begin without it. But it really is important to plan your steps, understand how important it is to consider each step carefully as you're proceeding. We started with directors that we already knew, so we didn't have to go through the selection process, which I learned was also, you have to be incredibly intentional about that as well. But I would say just making sure all of your moving parts are working together, however that looks for you. For us, it was retreats, it was meetings, it was going together and making sure that everybody understood the mission, and then professionalizing the board. I'd say that's how we sort of made it so.